Sometimes between long runs of really dense, action-packed, or really narrative-heavy games, I like to unwind and cleanse my palate with something different. And quite often, I find one of the best genres to turn to in such times is the logic puzzlers, but more accurately, the meditative ones. William Cheer's Manifold Garden is just that, but an especially exemplary example of such a thing. This game is available on PC, mobile devices, Nintendo Switch, PlayStation 4, and the Xbox One. Hell, next year it'll probably be running on 1896's Smith Premier 2 typewriter. Today, we're looking at the PlayStation 4 version of the game released on August 18th of 2020. The code for this game was provided by the developer for purpose of review, and I thank them for doing so. Generally speaking, for me, the best puzzlers require the player to think outside the box to overcome the challenges in a seemingly unorthodox manner, not through the use of moon logic or far-fetched solutions, but through the use of a consistent and established unorthodox in-game world logic. Thinking this way is something required of the player from start to finish here in Manifold Garden, as Manifold Garden doesn't just ask you to think outside the box, but to acknowledge that the box simply doesn't exist. Manifold Garden doesn't prove itself by trying to reinvent the wheel, rather it says, screw wheels, let's hover instead. But that's enough pontificating. Let's take a look at how this game actually works, and why I think such grand statements are earned. Over the past year, we've seen a few games, those such as Superliminal or Antichamber, starting to make use of non-Euclidean world designs, forced perspectives, and impossible geometry to take the puzzle game genre to the next level, and it's among those games that Manifold Garden fits in the best. 8 years ago, William Cheer started development on Manifold Garden to position himself well ahead of the curve. Calling on the works of MC Escher and famous architects to inspire his world design, he set out to envision these things within non-Euclidean spaces and create logic within the abstract. In these worlds he's created, we wander around in first person with the seemingly simple goal of transporting and nesting a colored block to its sympathetically colored housing, thus providing the power needed to unlock doors and access the next area. Sometimes the power supply is created by redirecting streams of water to water wheel structures using the indented pathways on the cubes. This can often be a multi-step process as well, where you may need to plant a new cube tree to get more cubes to work with along the way. The goals are rarely ever different, and the tools you have to complete your task basically never change. And that may sound like it doesn't offer much unique to the puzzle genre, but of course it's the journey between where these blocks start to where they belong that the challenge actually arises. At this point, you've likely noticed that there isn't too much color in this world, and that's more than just a simple aesthetic choice, as the little color provided serves as a wonderful beacon to keep you oriented and on the right track. Now, orientation is a huge hurdle to overcome in this game, but why? See, so long as you're close enough to a wall, you can hit one of the trigger buttons to shift gravity and orient to that wall, thus causing the floor you were standing on to lose their color and the floor you just oriented to take on a unique color of its own, identifying exactly what plane you're on within the 3D space. The blocks you've probably noticed are colored as well. Only while you're on the plane of the matching color can you interact with these blocks, and it's to that same plane that these blocks and their gravity are bound to. This, among other things, such as a total lack of a jump ability, can make transporting these cubes a very difficult and disorienting puzzle to overcome, but in the best of ways. So when you need to move blocks up a floor or two and there's no stairs to work with, how can this be done? Well, some blocks later in the game can be combined with other colors to have new gravity properties, or you can use blocks from an adjacent plane to form stairs or a table of sorts for lifting them up. But there's one far more interesting mechanic at work. Remember, this is a non-Euclidean world, and the quote-unquote box simply doesn't exist. So what does that mean? Well, all those crazy looking structures that you see out there in the distance, they're far more than just set decoration. This world is infinitely looping in every direction. Those structures that you see all around you, that's what you're standing on. So puzzle solving quite frequently involves completely breaking the natural boundaries of the world we've come to expect in video games, and the new world logic of Manifold Garden begins to take form. It's an incredibly mind-bending experience. Disorienting though it may be, it's a disorientation that breeds fascination rather than frustration. And as relaxed as the aesthetic and the wonderful OST made me feel, I was also always mentally alert and engaged. Being able to see the worlds repeating all around you also has a unique function I gradually came to see the value in as the game went along. Upon entering a new zone, 9 times out of 10, I needed to take a moment to try to understand exactly what I'm looking at. It can be very confounding, and Manifold Garden does not give a map of the zones to work with, at least not in any traditional way. Looking out at this vast repeating vista before you, we have all the maps we ever need. Look up to see the bottom of the zone, down to see the top, and all around to see the sides. It's limited enough that it only aids you in solving the puzzles and understanding each room, but it doesn't come anywhere near solving or undermining the puzzles or their brilliance. And things, of course, only get more complicated from here. So, did you catch what actually happened there? If not, let's try another example. So, non-Euclidean worlds, right? Where you're going may not always be where you end up, and it gets really trippy. And just for the sake of clarity, the worlds themselves are not truly non-Euclidean, they just use some smart coding, portals, and teleporting zones to trick the effect of it. So in function, they're non-Euclidean, but in design, they are not, at least not technically. The examples I had just shown, as well as many other instances of similar things, would constantly shock and awe me, and navigating these things was always a blast. Simply due to this game's ability to keep surprising me and making me think in unorthodox manners, Manifold Garden has skyrocketed its way onto my list of favorite puzzlers. However, there is one area of the game I felt was a bit of a letdown. There's no story, no narrative, not even really a loose goal communicated to the player. You can reason it out on your own that to complete the game you have to restore or rather discover all of the colors of the world, and thus complete the Manifold Garden itself. But to what end? Some may see this as a strength, as you can basically build your own plot to roleplay within the world, but I'd appreciate at least a few more breadcrumbs. It's not that stories are always needed in video games, of course, but I do feel it could have improved the experience just as it did with my favorite puzzler, the Talos Principle, or even some other simpler and charming puzzle games like Thomas Was Alone. Even if we were just doing here what we did in the Talos Principle and going around getting snips of world flavor and ethical dilemma stories off random computers thrown around the world, I would be happy. But alas, it is what it is. Though some people have apparently beat the game in 3 hours, it had taken me 6. I also didn't use the run button once and I got stuck a few times, so that might have made a difference. At 6 hours, the lack of a driving narrative didn't really affect my enjoyment any. I just think I could have gotten more out of this game if there was a story, but it's not really a massive deal. I did have the game crash once without any real loss of progress and did have an issue with this one cube not spawning here, but simply reloading my file fixed that. In terms of other technical issues, I didn't experience many. Sometimes when dropping through the world you may see a frame drop, and sometimes when transitioning between areas, the sound and music, which is great on its own by the way, tends to transition a little abruptly. But again, it's not a huge deal. What William and team built here is nothing short of incredible regardless, and if you're in need of a meditative puzzler, you really can't go wrong with this one. Manifold Garden exceeds in creating and strengthening the newest conventions for the puzzle game genre. It's an amazing start to something new, and it'll be incredible to see what works this inspired piece inspires in the future. And that's all I'm gonna say on Manifold Garden. If you guys liked the video or found it useful at all, you know the deal. Like, comment, subscribe, and share the video if you can. Links to all my socials are in the description below, and as always folks, thanks for watching. So yeah, this isn't really the anime or JRPG kind of game you really come to expect from this channel, but sometimes I like to try something new, and with a game this cool, you know, really just felt like I had to spread the news. So check it out if you're interested.